Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It is April the 14th. We have a great episode tonight. Our regular panel tonight includes our left-leaning panelist, Doug Sartori. Doug, how are you doing?
Very unhappy with that tag.
It's gonna stick. It's gonna stick. We have our resident socialist on the panel, Don Merrifield. Don, how are you?
Always happy to be here with my communist friends.
Of course, I'm John Lidke. I'm so happy to have a guest panelist here tonight who you can see on screen. For those of you who can't see on screen, it is Ward 8 Windsor City Councillor Gary Kaschak. How are you, Councillor?
I'm good, John, and thanks for having me. It's been a while since I've been on Rose City Politics, and it's always an honor to speak with the panel and talk about the great city of Windsor and its issues.
Especially because appearing on this show means that your reserved parking spot is now going to be painted over and removed. So we really appreciate you making that sacrifice for the community.
Well, I appreciate that, Doug. Thanks for reminding me.
If you are listening right now and you're not a Patreon subscriber, please head over to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. I'm still laughing at that one. That was really good. If you are a Patreon subscriber, thank you so much. As was mentioned, we are in BizX Magazine monthly and online at bizxmagazine.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. The MySpace joke, it's getting old. I'll think of something new to Don likes it enough to give it like a little half nod there, but that's good. We're everywhere you can find us. Like, share, subscribe. We would love for you to interact with us as well on social media. And of course, thank you to LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. They make this program possible on a weekly basis. So thank you so much. We have a show to get to tonight. We're going to be talking about traffic calming and residential speed limit reductions. Windsor's vulnerability to automation. A new Conference Board of Canada index has come out. Mayor Dilkens has a new pitch to the federal government about vaccine distribution. And we're going to be talking about how Windsor police are being mistaken for Windsor police in a situation that's causing both Windsor police a lot of confusion and online backlash. That was a fun one to say quickly too, but we're going to get right into this. Traffic calming and residential speed limit reductions. Again, let's say big thanks to Windsor Star and CTV, cribbed a lot of this from them. Following the City of Windsor's Environment, Transportation, and Public Safety Standing Committee's recommendation to Council to adopt a citywide 40-kilometer-an-hour speed in residential areas, the issue will be heading to Council on Monday. If approved, the estimated cost to install new signs is about $750,000. According to a 2017 road safety report, 14% of fatal and serious injury collisions occurred at intersections, while 24% occurred mid-block. While also, according to Windsor-Essex County Health Unit, cause of emergency department visits and mortalities for motor vehicle collisions, there were 145 emergency department visits due to pedestrian injured in collision with car, pickup, truck, or van, and 7 mortalities caused by the same. So obviously, it's an issue here. This is why the report from the Environment, Transportation, and Public Safety Standing Committee made the recommendation, although the report did say that research found that reducing speed limits doesn't cause significant changes in operating speeds. So that's where we were. This issue was heading to Council on Monday, and we had a Mayor Dilkens news drop to sort of change a bit of the narrative here with a new proposal that came out of left field. Mayor Dilkens is proposing, instead of reducing the speed limit, he's pitched a $1 million capital fund to pay for traffic calming measures if approved by a majority of residents, presumably on a block, by a petition. Now, these traffic calming measures, in most cases speed bumps, cost between $3,000 to $5,000 a piece. And councillors, I'm sure that Councillor Kaschak here could attest to this. It's the number one complaint that councillors receive from constituents is people driving too quickly. The province changed legislation back in 2017 to allow municipalities to change their blanket speed limits. Now, our panelist tonight, Ward 8 Councillor Kaschak, commented, I've seen in Hamilton and Toronto where the posted speed limits have gone down from 50 to 40 and 40 to 30, and I've physically seen it slow down, and I've asked residents and they've said it slowed down. You combine that with speed humps, speed tables, some stop signs, pavement parking, radar feedback signs, maybe some segregated bike lanes and posts, it's going to work. Now, Mayor Dilkens recommends the traffic calming measures rather than reducing the speed limit because he says residents won't follow the law. Ward 1 City Councillor echoed that sentiment as well. And Mayor Dilkens actually points to his previous experience as a councillor when he fought successfully for a speed limit reduction on the streets around Roseland Golf Course a decade ago. These days, the 40-kilometer speed limit is, quote, largely ignored, says the mayor of the city of Windsor. So I'm going to go to you right off the bat here, Councillor, with this. You're the guest panelist. You're also an elected councillor, so you've got the most insight here on the panel rather than the three of us who just, just blab our way through the show here on a week-by-week basis. You say that you've seen the speed limit reductions work and traffic calming measures work. You've even gone so far to speak about segregated bike lanes. So could you please give us your perspective on the matter here?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll just go back to what you said earlier. It probably is the first or second topic that me as a Ward 8 City Councillor and a lot of my council colleagues get in regards to they're going too fast, they're not slowing down, they're going through stop signs, they're rolling stops, they're racing up and down streets, and tie that in with, with some of the loud mufflers. So I raised the council question probably about 6 months ago that if Windsor decided to reduce residential speed limits from 50 to 40, what would be the implications and what would be the costs? So that's sort of come out now, that council question and the administration report, and it's, being tied in with traffic calming. So, my oldest son lives in Toronto. He lives in the Woodbine Street, Danforth area. So I'm, used to be up there a couple times a year and saw how what they've done there with, with some of the narrowing of streets, with a little bit of roundabouts, with speed humps, with speed tables, traffic calming signs, some pavement markers. I think it's the article said pavement parkers, but it's pavement markers, which is important. Some segregated bike lanes, with the plastic poles, and it forces people to slow down. It definitely works. So in a place like Church Street or Victoria Street or Balfour or Bartlett or Morand or Ducharme, places like that, it's going to work on those type of streets. Now, some of those streets are a little wider as well than some of the streets in Toronto. Toronto was built with a lot of density. A lot of these 35-foot lots and pack a lot of houses in and narrow streets and whatnot. So, in Windsor's built a different way. We have some of those neighborhoods in Walkerville that are certainly like that with the narrower streets. And then you get out to a couple of the streets I mentioned, in the Ducharme or Morand or Schofield in the Ward 9 area that are wide, and the houses are set back, and people will tend to speed, further down those type of roads. So I think that it's doable. I think, though, the first step, though, is to reduce speed limits from 50 to 40 on all residential streets. I'm not talking about collector streets or arterial roads, but we get down on those, and then we work in what the mayor is talking about with some of the effective traffic calming measures. And it's probably about a 6-prong attack if you want to do it on certain areas. You try speed humps, speed tables on certain streets, some pavement markings, some segregated bike lanes on something like Dougal coming out of downtown all the way to Tecumseh Road, and see how those type of things work. And I think we'll see some results.
What do you take from your council colleagues, from the mayor, saying it won't work because people aren't going to abide by the signage? I guess, more broadly going, we can't trust our residents to follow the law. Not looking to get into a back and forth here about the merits of it, but I guess, it seems absurd to suggest at the elected official level, well, no one's going to follow the law, so why even bother?
Well, yeah, I was a little disappointed in that statement because I don't think that maybe Windsorites are given enough credit to follow the law. People do like to go a little faster. Cars are made a little bit different now. Roads are made a little bit different as well. But I think if, it's a mindset sometimes about the 10 over rule. So if it's 50 going down Roseland Street, people are going to go 60 and feel comfortable with it. But if it's 40 kilometers and they maybe go 50 at the most, then you throw in a couple of traffic calming measures. I think people are going to kind of fall in a little bit better. Now, there's the naysayers. There's the people that just want to go from A to B fast. They want to get around town. They want to leave 5 to 7 minutes later than they should have, like Don. And then, of course, try to, all kinds of fast measures to get to where they want to go. So, that's human nature as well. It's sort of a little bit of the society today that everything happens fast. You get information fast, you get somewhere fast, and you punch something in a computer and you get an answer fast. So everything is about fast, but I think we just need to slow down a little bit in the residential areas.
Do you think that it's speaking maybe a bit to different constituencies there in the city? Not necessarily just saying, it won't work blanket like across the city writ large, but those concerns that you're saying, trying to get from one end of the city to the other end of the city, it would be far more impacted if it was slower, I guess, along the entire route, I guess. Is that maybe the argument that might be coming forward?
I think certain areas of the city, a couple of those streets I mentioned, and, maybe out around some of the South Windsor areas, the streets are wide and people do have the opportunity to go a little bit faster. I think getting across Windsor, though, there's 5 ways to go east-west, through Windsor, and you can get there in 15 minutes, whether it's County Road 42, the EC Road Expressway, Tecumseh Road, Wyandotte, or Riverside Drive. So those aren't streets that we're really looking at slowing down, although we may want to look at Wyandotte somewhere down the road here as the bike lane spot that people could go east-west and feel a little bit safer. But north-south, there's a lot of ways to get around too. It's just when, you get off Dougal and you go down West Grand and you make a left down Woodland or Academy or Rockwell, guess what? Everybody's stepping on it, 60, 65 kilometers. And to me, there's no reason to be going that fast in residential areas with children, with schools nearby. People walking dogs. It's an active society now with people out walking and whatnot. And I don't feel that that's the quality of life that most Windsorites want. And it does change a little bit from different wards to different wards, I'd say, for sure. Yes.
Hey, thanks for that. I find it to be really interesting. I think, as I mentioned, I don't like this idea of, well, we'll just let the residents ignore the written law because we can't believe them to follow it. It seems like a really weak argument to me. But if someone's trying to serve the needs of their constituency or their ward, I can understand wanting it to be for that reason. And I guess it's sort of like being on the 401, right? Everyone travels at that 117 to 118, but the second you get to 120 above it, I guess it's that sort of mentality of, the sign is there, but people will do what they're going to do. So what's the safest way to make it? Doug, I'll bring you in on it. You live in the area that you've talked about on the show before, not really breaking any news here. You live in the area where the mayor is saying that the speed limits are largely ignored. What do you see on the ground and what's your perspective?
Yeah, so I was surprised at those comments. I do live on Roseland Drive, and I have lived here for 10 years, and I walk this street almost every single day. So I have literally walked Roseland Circle thousands of times, and I'm not the only one. Councillor Kaschak mentioned that people like to walk, and this street is very much a shared street. We have no sidewalks on Roseland, and you'll see families, children, people walking dogs, cyclists, as well as vehicles all sharing the road. And I didn't live here before the speed limit was 40 kilometers an hour, but there was resident demand for the speed limit to be lowered, and I can only see what I see now, and that's that I live on a pretty quiet street that where folks are comfortable using the road and sharing the road with motor vehicles. My kid walked to school by herself every day. Lots of kids are able to walk themselves to school. It's so I was really surprised by the mayor's comments because It doesn't match my experience. I think that if you're asking whether or not a 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit works, I'm not sure, but it certainly is. You know, I wouldn't say that speed limit is ignored here. I think it's pretty respected on this street. Just a couple other things I wanted to mention here. So I'm broadly in support of this initiative. I think it's the right thing to do. When you look at the list of reasons for accidental fatalities in our community, and vehicle accidents and people being struck by vehicles, they're near the top of the list. And from what I can see, it's the number one thing that City Council has the ability to control. Roads, speed limits, these are things that are within City Council's control, and they can do a lot to have an impact on the survivability of incidents with vehicles. So I think it's the right thing to do. In anticipation of this show, I took a look at a few other communities' council reports on the same subject. I read the Windsor administrative report, and I wanted to compare it. And all of them have a common theme, in that there's not a lot of evidence that changing speed limits alone will change behavior. So I think Councillor Kaschak is right on the money there, that you need to take a layered approach, and speed limits aren't a magic bullet, but it certainly is the first step. One last thing before I hand it off on this topic, and that's that I did the math, and you can repeat this experiment if you want to check my math. Pull up Google Maps and ask Google Maps to give you a route from the extreme southwest of the city to the extreme northeast of the city. If you do that, you'll get a distance. And now calculate how long it takes to travel that entire distance at 50 kilometers an hour, and how long it takes to travel that entire distance at 40 kilometers an hour. The longest possible trip in the city of Windsor would take 6 minutes longer at 40 kilometers an hour, assuming you were on residential streets the entire way, which is not typically what people do. The point is that I'm trying to make is that I think the impact will be trivial on people's travel time. I think that that's a very, very small price for each of us as individual motorists to pay for increased safety in our community.
Well said, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. 6 minutes is unacceptable. I'm sure that Don would agree with that. We're going to bring his voice in. Don, let's be honest, you're just whipping around on your motorcycle at speeds that we can't comprehend. What's your take, and what are your questions here?
100%. At 6 minutes, Doug sounds like a quitter to me, but we'll talk about that later. Actually, funny enough, when Councillor Kaschak brought up his son, Danforth and Woodbine, I actually lived at Danforth and Coxwell for a long time. And when those low-rise speed bumps in the streets came into effect, I was living there at the time and heard the whole debate. So a few of the questions that were brought up at that time, and I'm not sure if they've been brought up at this point, is putting speed bumps in the middle of the roads. There's problems with plowing the roads at that point, and B, also emergency vehicles. So the proposal that Windsor's looking at, are they looking more like the Toronto ones, which are they're a lot wider than your normal speed bumps, and they're probably only about 6 inches high, but they still can launch you pretty good?
Not really, Don. There is that one on Riverside Drive around Lakeview Marina. That's sort of a gradual speed hump. I think they're looking for some of the ones around, those side streets off Danforth, around Amroth and Coxwell, and a few of those other streets where you better slow down a little bit, or you're going to have some undercarriage vehicle trouble if you go too fast. So, now that's what we would be, sort of looking at in some of the, certainly the residential streets. But, the one on Riverside Drive is more of a speed table, as they call it. So it's not as high, and it sort of is a little more gradual. So there's less chance of repairs to vehicles, and it's easier on the snowplows. You're right.
Yeah, last year I was riding out to Kingsville. I don't know what was going on in Kingsville, but they actually had put up temporary speed bumps on some of the side streets, and I assume that is probably a solution, for snowplows and things like that. Is that something that Windsor may be looking at?
It's been discussed. They're durable for not as long as a properly built speed hump, but you could take them out in the wintertime and make it a little bit easier on streets with buses, or some of the heavy snowplow streets, like a street like myself. I live on Clemenceau Street in Ward 8. It's sort of a cut through street. It's between Jefferson and Rivard. So people like to get to the back of Fontainebleau without going down Rivard, and 4 stop signs and police presence and 40 kilometers enforced. So they cut through here, and then the bus goes down here as well. So that would be what they would look at, those type of speed humps to this area where they can take them out in the wintertime and do the snowplow work. It's a little more maintenance, though, of course, for the city to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was another thing that had been brought up years ago, and it was more by the residents. So I live downtown. I live, Victoria Church, that area. And at some point in history, and this was probably before I was around, they had converted all these to one-way streets. Would converting them back to two-way streets slow traffic down significantly?
Well, absolutely it would, for sure, because you've got traffic going both ways, and probably cars parked on one side of the road. So when that happens, it forces a slowdown for sure. Yeah, you're right. Some of the downtown streets are the one ways, and that's the complaint in Hamilton, that if you're going east on King Street, it's a one-way speedway, and you're going west on Queen Street, coming the other way, towards the 401. So they're even talking about changing that there as well. And that's on arterial and collector roads that they'd like to slow that stuff down. But that's a good point as well. And I don't think we ever really mentioned the enforcement word yet either. That we certainly something that we'd like to talk to the police a little bit more about is something to do with residential enforcement. They are out from time to time in certain areas. I've seen them near my house, and a couple of times when I'm out in the ward. I'd like to get a little bit more, obviously, enforcement of that type of stuff versus sitting and maybe and I know you got to do sit on the middle of EC Row every so often and catch the guys going 130 and 140, but just maybe a little more of that. Back to the neighborhood, some boots on the ground, some unmarked cars, a couple of radar signs set up, and go from there. And I mean, you probably know the talk of the city looking at red light cameras here moving forward. They picked out about 10 intersections, which that's going to be interesting which 10 they pick. But I think there's that's another issue where people are really speeding up to go through red lights. I'm not a big supporter of the unmated speed enforcement, but we'll see where that discussion moves with council, and I think that might come into play a little bit on Monday as a potential alternative. That the mayor sort of threw the law ball out there of looking at something different.
Yeah. So talking about the mayor's pitch of this $1 million capital fund, I'm not sure if it's a one-time fund or if it's one that would be, I guess, topped up every now and then as it needs to be. Didn't explain that, but I guess, Councillor, it felt a lot to me, like this has a lot of remnants of what feels like the enhanced capital budget. And, I've got a lot of misgivings about how that process worked, but putting that aside, at least it was the elected representative who was the one who was deciding on behalf of the constituents. We live in a representative democracy. It's how it's all done. In that, though, it removed city administration from the decision-making, but presumably their input was still available from you as the councillor if you wanted to go find out whether or not it was a good decision to do something or not. Whereas in this case, it removes administration, it removes the councillor, and it would put it firmly in the hands of the residents. And now I get, let's say 70% on a petition. That's a pretty high bar to meet, but we still have to figure out, is that on a block by block basis? How would that work? But what do you think about, this decentralized model of, giving it to the citizens to deal with on their own terms? Or do you think, is that just a red herring? Do you think that you'll ever be able to actually get a plurality that would be required to actually implement this?
Well, that's a good question, and that's that's something that when you get people to complain sometimes, but then when you ask them to do a little bit of something about it, they don't. They sort of say, well, councillor, we thought you'd take care of it, or get a hold of the police and get them to take care of it. So I think that's part of the concern that I have with that. And I'll tell you from a personal standpoint, I have one block in my ward that is badly in need of road reconstruction, but it needed to go through the local improvement method policy where you needed 70% petition. So 2 residents have done this in the last 10 years. And I was told when I'm campaigning and since elected, and they pretty much give up on it. They run into some problems with residents. I think they heard no a few too many times and let it go by the wayside. So, you know, in talking with some of these residents, I said, well, how about if I do that with one of you? I'll go to every door in that block with you, and let's see what we can do. So I did have one lady give me a pretty good effort. She probably went to about 70% of the houses with me, but I went to 100% of the houses, told them who I was, told them that I'd like to get this street road reconstructed, but we need to have a petition in play. And at the end of the day, it took me quite some time, but I did get 70% to sign the petition. You know, that was sometimes 3 and 4 times to people's homes, knocking on doors, you know, and different things. And this was before pandemic, so it was even a little bit easier for people to answer the door. So it's tough when you kind of put it back in people's laps. I'm a little concerned now. A counselor like myself, who doesn't works pretty much as a full-time counselor, has a little more time to do that. I think I could make that happen on some streets and get some of those petitions signed. But you know, some of the counselors that have day jobs and younger children and stuff like that, that's going to be pretty tough for them to do. So that's why I'm concerned about that pitch going back that way. I think I'd like to see, as Doug said, that it go to 40 first, and then let's enhance some of the traffic calming measures in there. And, you know, and a couple of things that we haven't spoke about as well that they're finding that effective is more roundabouts, you know, in certain areas, and chicanes, which, you know, you don't see too much in Ontario, Windsor, obviously, or in Ontario, but a big thing in Europe that slows a lot of traffic down. And, you know, would certainly be an interesting, way to go as well moving forward. So, you know, I got a good article here that, you know, the administration, didn't really refer to speeds too much, and I apologize. I'm gonna have to just read it off my phone here, but it's from a magazine called Municipal World, and I think Doug's familiar with it, the August of 2020 edition, and it talks about reducing speeds, and it says a pedestrian struck by a vehicle traveling at 32 kilometers an hour, 20 miles per hour, has a 95% survival rate. Vehicles traveling at 48 kilometers per hour, 30 miles per hour, result in a 45% pedestrian fatality rate, while vehicles traveling at 64 kilometers, 40 miles per hour, have an 85% fatality rate. Clearly, speeds make a huge difference for all involved, particularly if you happen to be the pedestrian. So that's based on a traffic specialist, a fellow by the name of Wes Guckert out of the United States, and it's in the magazine that each and every counselor and the mayor and likely administration gets each month. So that's pretty telling stat there that reducing speeds certainly can work. And there's another article as well, and I try to forward it to you. I should have forwarded it to you before the meeting, also in the CAA magazine about speed limits. And, it used to be about moving traffic and around the city efficiently and fast, but that's changed. You know that it's an active world now. It's people getting out, and it's now more err on the caution of safety. And maybe go back to the example Doug did, where it might take you 6 minutes longer to cross the whole city, but that's fine because we made it safe. And a lot of us counselors like this Vision Zero, endeavor that's out there as well. Councillor Holt started with that, and the more I read into it, and the more I listened to him and a couple of the other counselors, I think that's the way to go. And if you could get them some type of Vision Zero, I think that's there's certainly some workability in that. Cities like Edmonton have gone to 40 kilometers all the way through their residential areas. Hamilton, Toronto even has some 30s. I've got some pictures of 30s in the East York area, with speed humps. So it's effective. It just depends how much money you want to spend at it. But Doug is right. The city council has the ability to make a difference in this matter.
It's interesting, the statistic that you had brought up there about, obviously as speeds increase, the rate of mortality increases with it. And, you know, I guess you look back to what the report from the Environment and Transportation Committee said, that there's no evidence that lowering speeds will lower the speeds. But I suppose say that to someone who has just lost someone by a vehicle collision where it was due to a higher speed. And I would imagine that, you know, simply doing anything would probably be a great place to start, rather than having this continual debate. We would all love to have that idealized city that has every amenity that there is, that's perfect, but that takes money and it takes time to get there. But there are very practical ways that we can go about it right now. Doug, you know, again, you're the resident person who lives in the area there. I want your take. You're going to be, you know, dealing with these petitions now. Who knows how often if this goes through? What's your take on the petition process? Are you like me and looking at this just in a bit of a weird way, or am I offside here from the panel?
Oh, I think you're right on that it's a red herring. Go and look at the municipal election results for any recent year that you want, 2018, 2014, doesn't matter. And look at how many polls attained 50% turnout. Very, very few polls in this city attained 50% turnout. The point of that is that, and you heard Councillor Kaschak describe the level of effort that it takes to reach these thresholds. It takes organizing and groundwork. You know, a councillor can do that, and a councillor with time and energy who cares about the issue can do that. But asking an average resident to go to that level of effort in order to get some traffic calming on their street is not reasonable. So, you know, I think that it really would make this fund ineffective to set those kind of thresholds for petitions. And I kind of agree with some of your earlier thoughts, John. You know, I do think that it is a bit of an abdication of responsibility. There is obviously, I think there's a huge place for consulting the public and finding out what the public thinks, and for the public engaging in municipal politics and in municipal affairs. But it's quite a different thing when you're going to paralyze yourself unless every single person, or 70% of the people in a neighborhood, get off the couch to sign a petition. I just don't see it happening.
Don, I'll get your voice in on this before we'll ask the councillor how he thinks Monday's vote will go, and then move on to the next segment.
Well, I don't actually, I don't disagree with you guys. It does seem to me like, you know, why throw this back at the neighborhoods to,
yeah,
you know.
But you were just gone though for like 2.5 minutes. So where did you go and how fast did you get there?
I made it all the way to the east side. I'm in Riverside now. It's fascinating. You know, and the good thing with those speed bumps, if you make them low enough rise, I can launch my motorcycle and take 2 at a time. It's fantastic. Yeah, I think what Doug said is right. I don't think throwing this back on the citizens and saying, well, if you want it, come and get it. Again, I was gone for 2.5 minutes, so if I go over anything that you guys said, I'm sorry, but I do agree that just, you know, I think lowering the speed limits is an effective way to slow things down, but I think that people who are speeding are going to speed anyway. So I don't think it stops the people who are breaking the law from not breaking the law now. I don't think that's going to change things. So that's why I think more important than, you know, if you're not going to have enforcement, and I'm not a fan of red light cameras because I'll go broke. The reality is I think you have to put the traffic calming measures in. I think the low rise speed bumps that they had in Toronto when I was there were very effective. Even the ones out in Kingsville, they were very abrupt. It was more like hitting a wall. And they were a little bit harder to see, so that may, you know, be a little bit more dangerous for some people. But yeah, I think it's a good idea, and but I think they should just look at the city. And you know, I live downtown, like I'd mentioned earlier, and you know, I'm on a one-way street and a bus route, and you know, it's basically a racetrack through here. As much as I joke about going super fast on my motorcycle, I really don't. You know, we have the opposite of speed bumps. We have potholes everywhere, so you can't go that fast on our street. So I think it's a good thing. But yeah, I'd like to see the city just look at the most troubled areas and just, you know, don't wait for residents to act, just act on yourselves. And I go back to a question I brought up to Councillor Kaschak that I'm going to reiterate. I do think if a lot of these streets downtown were changed to two-way streets, that would be the biggest difference you can make to slowing traffic down around here.
Don, I think you've got a great idea here. This is a huge rebranding opportunity for the city. Forget potholes. Those are naturally occurring 100%. Reverse speed bumps.
No, I know. It's fantastic, man. It's not a bad idea. It's all marketing. Now, Councillor, the vote's going to be happening on Monday.
How do you see this playing out? What do you think, that we're just going to end up with $1 million here for the petition fund? Not to call it a petition fund, but that's a pretty fun way to put it. Or do you think that we're going to see maybe some kind of a hybrid between the two, maybe a pilot project on some streets? We know that the committee, at the committee level, it was supposed to be just a 1-year pilot project, but that was scrapped just to go forward with the entire recommendation. So do you think that there might be any curveballs here, or is the writing in stone?
Well, no, it's going to be close. And I know, Councillor McKenzie predicted a 6-5 vote. And I think that might have been the way it was going to go until the mayor, come in with this new potential path. There's a couple councillors I think are on the fence, to be honest with you, on this. I think they want to go this way, but I think they're looking at, a debate. It was well debated at the standing committee, 3-2, and it'll be interesting to see. I think what I'd like to see is a mix of we do go to 40 all the way through, and then we do move some of these traffic calming methods forward, whether it's through petitions, because like I said, that's a tough go, or maybe do we give each councillor a traffic calming budget of maybe 20,000 or 25,000 a year, and say, all right, councillor, go ahead. If you want to put some speed humps in on on York Street, from Tecumseh to Giles or Erie, and that's your test street, and see how it works for a couple of years and go from there. Or I like permanent radar signs. You see them in Toronto. Don probably saw them, coming off Lakeshore and up Woodbine as you go towards Danforth. It's telling you all the time, and it's not the trailer that it was out for a week and moved somewhere else. It's telling you all the time that you're going 46 or 42 or 71. So
those are just incentives for people like Don.
Well, yeah, there are some people that say, geez, I thought I could go faster than that, right? But it's something that I think it's a lot of times it's mental. Oh, I didn't realize I was going that fast, or I think I better slow down. And but I think it's this active world that we live in. We've got so many people out, and it's it's quantified even more in the pandemic here, where we're asking people to get outside, to do more, to go outside. You can't do this, you can't do that. So they're walking dogs, and so on and so forth. So let's slow traffic down. There's no need to to go fast in a lot of these residential areas. Some of the streets are perfect to slow down. Some are going to be a challenge, as I said, those big, wide sweeping streets. And, that's something that we as council and the planning department and building department and developers have to look at moving forward down the road to maybe not have these big, wide streets as much. And I mean, I think it's going to go that way with density and in smaller subdivisions. But, the days of building, some of the streets that I mentioned before, Roseland, Moran, Ducharme, Schofield, Wallace, that are very wide and tend to be potential racetracks, I think it might be over with.
If I can give you a little bit of advice, not that you need my advice, I would avoid anything Councillor McKenzie says. We've known him for a long time, and to be honest, I'm not even sure he actually got elected. It's just
okay. We're not even gonna humor that conversation right now.
Moving
Don.
on.
Thanks, Don. We needed some comic relief there. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Kaschak, thank you so much for pitching that topic there. We had a really good conversation back and forth. Went a little longer than I think we expected, but what is better than having a back and forth like that with an elected representative? I can't think of much. So
well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And it's, it's something that I'm passionate about. I know it's going to, probably cost me some votes even down the road, because I think there's some people that want that and some that don't, but I'm passionate about it. And I think it's a better way for Windsor to move forward, and I'm willing to do it.
No, thank you. So we're going to get on to the next segment here, assessing Windsor's vulnerability to automation. How will the labor force in Windsor fare in the future? Windsor currently has the highest share of workers in high-risk, low-mobility occupations than any other city in Canada. This is how the Conference Board of Canada's Automation Vulnerability Index begins its section on Windsor, Ontario. The Automation Vulnerability Index tracks occupational vulnerability and workforce resiliency to improve an understanding of Canada's unique skills training needs. The authors report Windsor has the highest share of workers in high-risk, low-mobility occupations among any city in the country, 32% higher than the national average. This is one of the key reasons why the region has one of the 5th highest AVI scores in the country. Windsor also has a fairly concentrated employment mix, with 60% of its workers employed by the region's top 5 sectors. Now, this report and its data does suggest some policy considerations to aid people to transition into what they say is less automation susceptible occupations. Other key reasons for Windsor's vulnerability include economic transition costs, 9.2% higher than the national average. The regional share of workers with a high school diploma or less, 2.5% higher than the national average. And the share of the labor force in slow growing occupations, 2.9% points higher than the national average. So, Councillor, again, I'm going to bring you in right off the bat, excuse me. How big of a risk do you think that automation is to our local economy? We're having this conversation here about automation, about, diversification. What's your perspective on what the risks are of automation?
Well, for sure, those stats are telling, John. There's no doubt, and we know that as we move towards the diversification in the automobile industry, that technology and battery electric vehicles, you can probably build one with 50% less staff, and you're going to throw some technology robots and less people in there. So we do certainly need the Windsor Works and the diversification thing even more so now. I think we still need to focus on automobility and moving forward. And we're putting the Windsor Economic Development Commission to work here to try to find more work for us. We'd certainly like to get into the battery electric field. I mean, it was nice to see that General Motors and Chryslers and Fords have all bought in that they would build battery electric vehicles in Canada. So let's use the former auto capital of Canada as the automobility capital of Canada, and get these type of jobs, and the spin-off jobs and the parts and the various other things that they can create. But certainly, we'd certainly like to meld out of manufacturing, and I always talk about IT, and Doug and I have talked about this before, about more of an IT presence in Windsor. Certainly healthcare, if we can get this hospital built and maybe a medical school in Windsor, and also some other specialized medical care in Windsor, I think it would be great. And certainly the education factor as well, and some more research and development, and maybe a few more things at that level as well. So yeah, concerned. It could certainly hamper Windsor's unemployment rate moving forward here.
The economic transition cost means that people are less likely to transition out of jobs that are at risk in the medium to long term because of the immediate personal cost. And the report authors suggest subsidies for retraining, or potentially even pay top-ups to mitigate this transition cost. Do you think that that's a strategy that could work here in our region? And how would you go maybe fighting for that, if so?
Well, sure. I mean, you're going to need senior levels of government to get behind this as well. And I think that certainly could be the way to go. I mean, what's happening with St. Clair College and the trade school, and the way that's growing, there's reams of opportunity there for on the tech side, and certainly the University of Windsor's got room to get bigger and expand the engineering school, and various other things. More scientists and battery type engineers would certainly be important. But yeah, I mean, you got a couple elections coming up here, I think, with the federal maybe sooner than later, and the Ontario election in June of 2022, and that'll be interesting to see how they lay that out moving forward. A job strategy for us, and maybe some subsidies, as you say, John.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. If there were a time for it, Lord knows, during a pandemic when federal funds are flowing, this is the argument that I took in our last BizX article, just saying, how do we position ourselves forward? Take advantage of the money that will flow, make sure that you have applications to put forward when those opportunities come. The reason that we have a festival site the way that it is and the retention pond as it is right there was because of the last recession that we had, quite frankly, and how nimble the city was in getting the applications in. Doug, I want to bring you in. I'm sure you've got some questions for the councillor and some thoughts on the matter. Lord knows it's your wheel well.
Yeah, sure. So I thought that this report adds a really important wrinkle to the debate, talking about some of the reasons why people are so sticky in occupations that they're in, high-paying jobs that may have be at high risk of automation, or may not have a long-term bright prospects in the future, but when it's hard for you to get out of it because it's going to cost you so much money immediately. And I think it's kind of interesting because that's a parallel to the position that Windsor finds itself in. I was listening to Councillor Kaschak and make his comments here, and I think we are so deep into the manufacturing sector that's where all of our expertise is. That's where our entrepreneurs are. That's where our connections and our understanding is. And to some extent, I think we're obligated to take a strategy of building on the auto sector in order to diversify. Whether it's a good idea or not, I happen to think it's not the best idea. But I think we're kind of obligated to do that because of where we're starting from. My concern is that there are some things identified in this report, and I think touched on lightly in Windsor Works as well, that are really hard to change. Relatively low educational attainment in the city of Windsor. Not because Windsorites are dumb or Windsorites don't value education, but because so many of our educated young people choose to leave the community for brighter opportunities. So I think there's a lot of real challenges here, and it's really hard to see how we're going to grapple with them. Hopefully, making some investments in technology will help. But I wanted to ask you, Councillor Kaschak, in 2005, the Windsor CMA was one of the top 10 regions in Canada in terms of household income. By 2015, we had fallen to 25th out of 36. And my view is that our focus on a handful of industries and the particular place where those industries sit in terms of the life cycle of an industry from growth to stagnation to decline, I think that's got a lot to do with it. What do you think is the reason that incomes in Windsor have declined so precipitously?
Well, that's a good question, Doug, and I don't know if I have the answer for that one, because it's we have put our eggs in one basket for the most part in manufacturing, and Windsor's been looking to diversify for a long time, and it's been a struggle. It's certainly these new auto jobs and parts jobs, that there seems to be a lot of jobs, but a lot of people are only making that $22.50 an hour and $24 an hour. Those days of the $35 an hour jobs don't seem to be there as much. And I don't know if that was a trade-off to keep some of these factories, the Chryslers in Windsor and whatnot, moving forward. And thus it's caused, the wages to go down. There's a little more of a service industry in Windsor as well, too. When the manufacturing jobs went down, and those don't pay quite as well. So I think it has hurt the median average on income for sure. And, and thus the need for diversification. I know that you've got some great ideas in the tech world and different things like that. And I mean, I'll put it back to you. What do you think of some of the stuff that Rocket Mortgage and some of that group is doing down on Chatham Street with, info technology going back and forth across the river? Is there room for expansion on that? Is that something Windsor can run with?
I'm glad you asked. It's pretty rare we have a guest ask me a question, but I really appreciate that. So I think that the trying to find a way to integrate with Detroit in tech the way that we have integrated with the auto industry is the natural play. It's the right play, and it's great to see companies like Rocket coming to Windsor. I think that my perception, and I haven't talked to those folks directly, I've only kind of heard things and talked to people who talk to them, that type of thing. But my impression is that there's some stuff that could be done that would make the impact bigger. I think that when you come to a city like Windsor, and I know the tech sector here pretty intimately, I've worked in it for a long, long time. You have to have a strategy to approach Windsor's workforce. You have to have a strategy to approach this market. There is a lot of talent here. There's a lot of tech talent here, and there's a lot of a big supply of tech talent in terms of the folks who graduate every single year. But if you take the things that work in Detroit or the things that work in other cities in the US in terms of recruitment, you're going to struggle a little bit because Windsor has some unique features in terms of its workforce. So, I think that it's terrific that we're seeing that happening. And I think that if I were the king of the Economic Development Corporation, I would be doing everything I could to build those cross-border relationships and make sure that the folks in Detroit who work in the tech sector see the same kind of advantages in having a cross-border workforce that the auto industry does.
Well said. And I'd sort of understood that to some degree as well too. And I think that was sort of the goal originally of a fellow like Dan Gilbert to do that, because there was the immigration problem with people, coming back and forth across the border and, in the previous U.S. federal administration, especially. So that's, that was to get on board. And I mean, we have, we have the Paul Martin building downtown that the city of Windsor owns. That's got, 5 empty floors there that we're certainly looking for somebody to come in that building in a tech type thing. And maybe that's where Weedsy needs to look a little or dig a little deeper, as you had said. And I think that's really the way to go, somewhere more in that IT thing. I mean, we're going to push on manufacturing because of battery electric, and it's going to happen at these plants in Ontario. But we've got to diversify more. And I like the Windsor Works report. I thought the integration with Detroit, I mean, it's always been a natural fit, and it's sort of been the obvious thing. But doing it more is certainly a way forward, I think. Yes.
Okay, I want to keep you on that one, Councillor. You like the report. You've been talking here about the work that Weedsy's been doing with it, but given how much risk is created by this sector, do you think that so much attention should still be paid to it? Is that not itself a risk of continuing to put all of our eggs in one basket?
I think it goes back to what Doug said earlier. It's the thing that we know. It's that's where a lot of the expertise, that's where a lot of the the knowledge is in auto engineering and the things that facet around it. So it's would we love to be like Kitchener-Waterloo and be real techie? Sure. Would we like to be like London, a little more medically and a little more corporate head office? Sure. Would we like a company like Slack or Salesforce or SoftChoice to be based in Windsor? Absolutely. But how exactly do we get that to happen is the question that a lot of councillors like myself ask. And how can we move that forward? And it may change now a little bit in the pandemic with people working from home, and they realize that you don't have to be working on Bay Street or King Street or Bloor Street in Toronto, that you can do that from other locations. So why not set up in a place like Windsor, Essex, for sure.
So then what are some of those next steps that the Windsor Works report should see followed through from it? What are you hearing? What's the stitch on the inside? Break some news here on Rose City Politics for us.
It's been quiet. It's been quiet for the last little bit. There was some in-camera topics recently that as I can't discuss, but there's some movement on some files here. We're just waiting to hopefully see this come to fruition on part of this Windsor Works report. So nothing that I can say at a high level, but really excited after meeting with the new CAO from Windsor, Jason Raynar, who comes in with some enthusiasm and from the Greater Toronto area, and I think he's got some good ideas and maybe some good vision that we can use moving forward. I'm certainly going to miss outgoing CAO Honorio Colucci, just a whirlwind of knowledge and experience, and just such a fine gentleman as well. So I like the direction here moving forward, though, that with some young mind and maybe some different way of thinking moving forward.
Okay, I just wanted to come in, since we're talking about Weed C, and we've got you on the show. I want to ask you this, Councillor Kaschak, and last year, the Economic Development Corporation spent close to $300,000 to promote the advancing the hospital to stage 2. And I want to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that was an appropriate use of economic development resources? Is that how you'd like to see those resources prioritized?
Well, not normally, no. That that was brought up quite well by Councillor Bordelin at the budget talks, and quite frankly, he worked over Mr. McKenzie pretty heavily on that, and it was a bit eye-opening to I knew the dollars that were involved and whatnot, but it was eye-opening, I think, to the rest of Windsorites and whatnot. So I don't think that's the focus that I'd like to see Weedsy moving forward. I think that's a very important topic, of course, and position, and I've always been for a new hospital in Windsor. Should that have been Weetsy's main focus? No, probably not. They probably should be looking for that diversification and that new big plant or that new big industry that Windsor can move forward on.
Hey, well, thanks for your perspective on that, Councillor. We had 2 other topics that we wanted to get to, but as is what usually happens on this show, we end up having a really good time, and we spend about a half hour, 35 minutes on one topic, and we give the remainder to the second one. And we wish that it was a 2-hour program. Now, it could be a 2-hour program if you Patreons would go tell some of your friends to sign up, patreon.com/Rose City Politics. But Councillor Kaschak, I will leave it with you right now. We talked about 2 issues here, whether it be the traffic calming or whether it be the automation. So any last thoughts about both, or, the floor is yours before I do the final wrap up.
No, it's great to talk about those type of things, and I'm always the mind is always turning with me. I'm always thinking of ways that we can improve Windsor, not just my ward. I'm a big Windsor guy. I worked downtown in the Paul Martin building for many, many years, and then worked for the Border, and I was downtown 4 out of 5 days a week. So I'd love to see that come back. I like the direction that it's going right now, with a lot of development, with a lot of community improvement plans. I love what's happening on Blisher Street. I was there yesterday at Sid's and got a sandwich and had a good look around the Hive and the Chelsea and the former bar area that's all under renovations and whatnot, and very excited with what's going to happen on OLED and some of the others on University and the Grace Hospital. Looking for a proposal here, at the University and Karen site here moving forward. There might be something brewing there as well. So I like where it's going here in the city. I think it's positive. We just need to keep grinding here, and and to keep moving forward here, and enjoying my job and doing the best we can, I think, for Windsor at this time.
Absolutely. I like that note to leave it on. I've been a downtown resident for the majority of my life, and it's astounding just to walk the streets and see how different things are going to look in such a short period of time, from the development on OLED Avenue, the Valente one, to the ones that you had just listed. I mean, when we emerge from COVID and everything is fully up and going, and those dates are shifting here or there based on vaccination, but I think for sure by next year, when people get back to the swing of what normalcy looks like, downtown's going to look like a very different place, with far more residents, which will bring with it more businesses, more cafes, more restaurants, and all of that. So hopefully that'll bring more opportunities in the business sector as well. But Councillor, thanks so much for spending your time this evening with us. It's so appreciated.
Well, thanks very much. Nice to be back on Rose City Politics, and bring me up anytime if you'd like me to come back. I always like to talk about Windsor and quality of life.
Absolutely. Hopefully next time we're able to share a pint after the show.
That would be good. Yeah, for sure. Yes,
that's the dream. Our regular panel tonight included our left-leaning panelist, Doug Sartori, our resident socialist, Don Merrifield, and right here to the right of them both, in the dead center, would be me, John Lidke. We had Ward 8 City Councillor Gary Kaschak join us tonight. Please, Patreon subscribers, keep it up. Tell your friends. We're at patreon.com/Rose City Politics. BizX Magazine every month, bizxmagazine.com. We're on social. Like, share, and subscribe, please. And of course, kind thanks to LiUNA 625, Building Better Communities. This is a show, and we'll see you next week.